The Battle of Brunete, July 1937. This stone and this square commemorate the victory of Francisco Franco. It was at Brunete that many Welshmen fighting in the Spanish Civil War saw action for the first time. Edwin Greening of Aberdare.
Well, you know what war is like? In Spain, it was absolute hell. I soon realized the first day I was in action that we were outgunned and outmanned. For every shell that our guns sent over, we received 50 back. The fascist planes and tanks were everywhere. Their mortars rained destruction everywhere. It was absolute hell. And after 12 to 15 days of no sleep, hardly any food, unwashed, we were completely exhausted. When we got out, we threw into reserve, we threw ourselves under the olive trees and slept for 2 days without a stop. All that we did was wait for the shout, grub up, and we went wearily and got the grub, and some grub it was. Mostly bean stew with a little meat, some coffee and bread, but the Spanish government couldn't help that. They were facing a savage war where the fascist powers were blockading Spain with the tolerance of the Western powers. But what a relief to get out of this hell of action in the line.
Most, but not all, of the British volunteers in Spain were members of the Communist Party. The first Welshman to get there, at a time when there were very few English-speaking volunteers about, was Will Lloyd.
We went right through Madrid and we had a great welcome from the people there. Numbers of people shouting, Rusky, Rusky, they thought we were Russians. There we made contact with the Garibaldi battalion, Italian battalion. All these had these red neckerchiefs, you know, very colourful. And when they talk about Italians can't fight, these men, you should have seen these men fighting. They were great.
One Welshman fought on the side of Franco. He went into a Cardiff travel agency, booked a ticket for Lisbon, and crossed into Spain. Frank Thomas.
The attitude I had when I went to Spain is quite simply summed up. I left school in 1931. I was a chicken farmer for several years. Then I became a commercial traveller for a couple of years. And I got absolutely fed up calling on the same people every day, every journey. It was the same people, the same towns, and I got so fed up I wanted to do something active. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, the Civil War broke out in Spain. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity to develop my career. And it was from there the idea came to go to Spain. I chose the side I chose because, frankly, I've always been right-wing in politics. I wouldn't say extreme right-wing, but definitely right-wing. As a result, I couldn't fight on the left-wing side. In addition, at that time, there had been quite a few pictorial records of things which were being done in Spain, burning of churches, etc., etc. And although I was a Protestant, it just didn't go down with me. So obviously, I chose Franco's side. I suppose the notion of joining the Spanish Foreign Legion appealed to me from a romantic angle. This is why possibly the idea of joining came into my mind, having made up my mind originally that this was an opportunity to get away from the humdrum existence I was leading.
Franco had received his first batch of bombers from Mussolini and the first of his Junkers from Hitler within 10 days of the start of the war. Early on, before a communist discipline was imposed on the rough and ready Republican army, there were all sorts of splits and factions. There was a joke that said that the anarchist military code ran like this. Paragraph 1, there shall be no order at all. Paragraph 2, no one shall be obliged to comply with the preceding paragraph.
When we went there, the communists had their own battalions, the socialists had their battalions, the anarchists, the POOM had their own battalions, and they were running it as an independent army. Many stories came that the anarchists wouldn't fight on certain days because it was a celebration or some celebration they had. The socialists wouldn't combine with these. And we had these stories constantly told us as soldiers. Now it was later that we had a unified command. But I've seen personally young Spaniards would come up the line, fight, and go back home for the night. I've seen them lighting fires in the front line, which is a stupid thing to do.
The communists had regiments. The 5th Regiment was a noted one, and tremendous fighters. And the anarchists had the Durruti division, and the Republicans had another, but they had crack units, each of these political groupings. And it was very difficult because sometimes there was serious disagreement between them, and in particular the anarchists, because they would sometimes not like the officers they had elected. And if they'd had a bit of a mess in a battle, they'd probably try the officers and shoot them because of the mistakes they had made.
Early on, Frank Thomas got a Republican bullet through his cheek.
In those days, the Foreign Legion was a Foreign Legion. We had plain adventurers, we had criminals possibly, people who had religious beliefs, people who just wanted to disappear. We had all sorts. Discipline was very, very strong. The main thing was your rifle had to be clean at all times. This was the cardinal thing. I've seen an officer kick a man because his rifle was dirty. On the training ground, corporals used whips. We had these sort of whips, bull whips, which were used. I mean, not unnecessarily, but certainly were used. This is how the Legion ran. They had to maintain some sort of discipline. And of course they had come over from Africa. Some of them were very long service legionnaires who'd been there for many years. They had no home at all, nothing, only the Legion.
I was, by temperament, by influence, by the impact of my home and town environment, more the pacifist than the militarist. And this inevitably gave rise to a profound personal crisis, a crisis that had to be met, the challenge had to be met head-on, for there I was now on Spanish soil. And I suppose what sustained me in my own personal crisis was my profound conviction that I'd entered quite freely into the cause of the Republicans. I was determined to fight this battle and to sustain my commitment to the cause to the very end.
When I looked at the churches that we had to destroy or damage very badly, it always hurt me, and indeed any building, because some of the buildings were very beautiful, and churches in particular. And there was a feeling that I was doing the wrong thing. But you see, the fascists used these churches as fortifications, and it was at Belchite where 500, we'd captured the small town, but 500 fascists had made a fortress out of the church. So they wouldn't surrender, so we had to make them surrender, and we had to blow at the church.
La 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 la.
This is Belchite as it stands today, left as a monument.
Eventually we had to fetch up French 75s in order to get them out. And we did get them out. The men would have given in much earlier, but the officers were shooting them every time they attempted to run away from the church. You see how to get out. And most of the people inside that church were destroyed by our fire.
La 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 la. Patrona de los mineros, mira, mira, Marucina, mira, mira cómo ven.